there's really two components here. There's mindset. There's how I approach this mentally and emotionally, what I tell myself, what I think. And then there's the outward, there's the action. So there's the mindset, and then there's the effort or the action.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It is your host, Adam A. Adams, and today I'm with Hal Elrod from the Miracle Morning podcast. He's also written a whole bunch of books and co-authored books with Miracle Morning this, Miracle Morning that. And actually, if you're watching the video, only a couple of you are, if you're watching the video behind him, he's got like all of these signs behind him for all of these books that he's written. Actually, randomly, I was an affiliate. I was a speaker at an event once upon a time, and I affiliated for that event because in the past, I was friends with this guy named Michael Blanc, and he learned that I had affiliated for other people and brought a ton of butts in the seats. And so Michael just asked me if I could find some people to come to his event, and we got several. And I had the honor of just sitting down with Hal for dinner because of that. So Hal was a speaker, I was a speaker, and then we all got to go up to the top of this, I don't know if it's a rooftop bar, but basically way, way, way up with beautiful views. And the cool thing that I want you to know is Hal is the real deal. He's just a really cool guy, down-to-earth guy, and you learn so much from him. So today in this interview, we're definitely going to talk about his podcasting journey. But there's other crazy things that has happened to him, and how he overcame it with cancer, losing weight, trying different ways of approaching life, and just his spirituality is real interesting. So I hope we can get into a bit of that. But I want to start here. In December of 19, something happened with Hal that really made it difficult for him to go on, right? And the interesting thing is, he kept his content on his podcast going, even through like a year or two of just dark hours. And so I want to start there. It's like, I have a podcast. My listener probably has a podcast, or they're about to launch one. And I want to understand, why did you do it? What made it important to keep it going weekly if you were going through stuff?
Yeah.
And I guess, how do we think through our journey as an influencer, as a podcaster, to even go through when the going gets tough, if you don't mind, Adam, starting there.
Thank you for all that, man. And thanks for having me. I appreciate this. So yeah, what you mentioned, 2019, I was actually getting ready to host our last live event for 6 years. My friend John Berghoff and I hosted an event called the Best Year Ever Blueprint every December in San Diego. It was figuring out, kind of planning your best year ever for the coming year. And this was our 6th year. And I decided, I'd been on chemotherapy for 3 years. You mentioned I had cancer, diagnosed with cancer in 2016. It was a very rare, aggressive form of cancer. I was given a 20 to 30% chance of surviving, which if you're a glass is half empty kind of person, that'd be a 70 to 80% chance that I was going to die. And with a daughter that was 7 years old, a 4-year-old son at the time, it was the scariest news of my life, being told that there's not a very good chance that you're going to live. But I live by this thing called the miracle equation. I wrote the book about it after the cancer journey, but it's unwavering faith and extraordinary effort is how you create tangible, measurable miracles in your life. And so I approach the cancer with, I have unwavering faith that there's a 100% chance I will be in the 20 to 30% of those that beat this cancer. And I just maintain that faith every day. And I put forth extraordinary effort. I did everything in my power, far outside the realm of what the doctors told me to do in terms of supplementation and organic diet and coffee enemas and lymphatic massage and ozone sauna. Every natural, holistic practice I could do to build up my body to counteract the effects of the chemo, right? I did all of that. And grateful to say I survived. About 2 years or so into that cancer journey, right? I guess, 2019. So it was about 2.5 years later, hosting this live event. It was the night before, and we had sold out the event. And I wasn't really, always a little nervous. You get a little nervous before you do anything, but I wasn't stressed. But for some reason, I didn't sleep that night. And I slept maybe 2 hours. And I had been kind of developing symptoms from chemotherapy. They call it chemo brain. which just upsets me because it's like doctors dismiss it as, oh, that's just chemo brain. I'm like, yeah, try to have your cognitive abilities taken from you, doc, and then just blow it off as chemo brain. But I had been really experiencing effects where I couldn't think straight. I couldn't communicate well. Like I was really trying. And I think it kind of culminated this night before the event. And that was a pivotal night in a bad way, where for the next 5 to 6 months, I slept for 2 to 4 hours a night on average. I can't even explain, like, think how you feel if you only sleep 2 hours and you got to work the next day. But if you could imagine that for a week and how effed up you'd feel, right? And then a month and then another, like I started hallucinating. I thought my business partner's husband was going to come kill me. Like I was a mess. And so in my entire life, I never had anxiety. Like I've never even experienced it. I didn't even know what it's like. And if somebody told me that anxiety, I would just be like, well, focus on the positive, blah, 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 right? Like I didn't get it. And I developed anxiety so bad that when I finally went and saw a psychologist, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. It was as bad as it could be. And I was afraid to talk to people. I was like, I lost my whole life. I've been pretty upbeat and optimistic and happy and relatively confident. All gone. I did not recognize. In fact, it got to the point where I remember I told my wife, I go, sweetie, I don't remember what it feels like to be happy. It's been so long since I have felt happy. I don't even remember what that felt like. And Adam, I got suicidal, like not to the point where I was planning it, but the suicidal ideation, I believe they call it, right? Where like I would literally at night, I'd lay awake, right? Can't sleep, feeling horrible and scared. And I would, and from the outside, by the way, right? Best-selling author, international speaker, top podcast, right? Like nobody would have known this except for, and I'll get to that, talking about it on my podcast. But it got really bad into where, I would literally, I remember I would think, how could I take my own life in a way that would minimally impact my children? Like that's how bad it was. That's the question I was trying to find an answer to, right? And I'm like, well, and I remember thinking, I'm like, maybe if I drive off a bridge or something, right? So I get in a car accident, so it looks like an accident. And then maybe if I record a bunch of videos for my kids about all the life lessons I want, like this is where I was at, right? Like, yeah, maybe that would work. And then make sure if I set up the finances so my wife's okay and taken care of. And then, and thank God I never got to a good enough answer of how I could pull that off, right? Not affect I'm like, this is going to mess up my kids. This is going to devastate my parents. Like if I didn't have family, I would have taken my life. Absolutely. So anyway, sorry for that long buildup, but that's where I was at. And I still had a weekly podcast that I had to host week after week after week after week after week in this place of I can't think clearly. I can't communicate well. I've got PTSD. I'm depressed, right? And so there's a few things. Number one is the reason I launched my podcast, right? So let's get into like, okay, here's some lessons. Here's what I got from that experience. Number one, the reason I launched my podcast, which was back in 2012, it was the year that I published The Miracle Morning. I wanted a way to nurture my readers. Like I didn't have a way to add value to my readers. And I'm a really slow writer. It takes me a long time to write. So I'm like, I can't blog. There's no way. That'd be too much pressure to try to get a post out every week. But I could talk, right? And so a buddy of mine had just launched like a podcast producing company. And so we launched the podcast. And a quick correction it's actually not the Miracle Morning podcast. It's the Achieve Your Goals podcast. Because when I launched it, I didn't know the Miracle Morning was going to become this international bestseller in 200 countries, millions of copies. Like if I would have known, I would have kept the brand the same. But I'm like, okay, I'll do an Achieve Your Goals podcast. I'll write this book called The Miracle Morning, right? I've got, this event called Best Year Ever. Like I didn't know what brand was going to become sticky. And so the Achieve Your Goals podcast, the reason I launched it was literally to serve. I didn't take a sponsor on for like 7 years. I never did it to make money. And now I have sponsors and it's a recurring revenue source. And that might have been part of it. I don't remember if I had sponsors when I went through all of this, but that might have been part of it. Like, okay, I have sponsors and I need that income to support my family. So I got to keep recording a podcast. But it also, I think, was just that like the expectation was there. I've got this audience. I help every week that, I get feedback that this really helps people. They really need this content. I can't, it's not about me. And that became a mantra. And that actually, I encourage people to consider that's a mantra for me in business and in almost every area of life. It's not about me, right? Yes, put your oxygen mask on first. The Miracle Morning is all about self-care. It's about becoming the best version of yourself every morning, right? But in terms of the work that you do, I think that if you can get to a place where it's not about me, I'm doing this to serve. I'm not doing it to make money. I'm doing it to serve, and then I make money because I'm serving. And I so subscribe to Zig Ziglar's philosophy of you can have everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Right. And I truly believe that if you can flip that switch where you really get to a place of selflessness, where you're like, I'm doing this to serve. And it's okay to be selflessly selfish, or maybe it's selfishly selfless, where you go, I know it's going to come back to me, right? Like, I know that the more people I help, the more goodwill I'm going to have in the world, the more people are going to want to support me. Like, it's okay to know you can be selfish and selfless at the same time. But that's really it. And so I kept putting out the content. I kept doing the podcast. I went through about 6 months and I finally got off chemo. That's what turned the corner is I finally emailed my doctor. I'm like, how long do you want me on this chemo? And he's like, your cancer is so rare. We're just going to keep you on it for as long as we can. And as long as you can handle it. And I'm like, doc, I want to kill myself every day. I'm going to say I can't handle it anymore. So I'm done. And he was like, well, I don't recommend that. And I got off the chemo and my brain, it was slow, but I started to get back to the old me. I kept exercising, doing all the healthy habits, right? And eventually, and now I'd say my anxiety, it shows up a little bit, like almost like I remember, like, wait, should I be anxious over this? I was anxious around these things for a long time. And I'm like, no, I'm back to the old me.
You get more anxious.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
But I'm not being anxious. So
yeah, the anxiety over the anxiety. So yeah, man, I don't know if I answered the question, but
you answered the question. So basically the question is like, why did you keep doing it? And really what we're getting is there's two main things. I mean, it was an income source, but also it was, you knew that you were impacting other people. Yeah. And it was kind of like your job or your calling to keep serving them. And I have a question, just like it might be derailing the conversation a little bit. And I'm coming from, what's the word for it? A naive place for this. Yeah. I've never had cancer. However, I've studied a bunch about fasting, and a lot of fasting like gurus say that if you take something like 7 days with no food in a row, you can kill any cancer. So random question. Have you ever tried fasting, and for how long, and did it help? I'm just curious myself.
No, and I should have done that. I don't know if I came across that content or not, or I'm sure I would have implemented it. But when you say that, it does ring a bell. So maybe I read that and I was maybe on chemo and exhausted and felt like shit. I'm like, yeah, I'll get back to that. And then I never did. It might've been that. But yeah, I don't know, but I have heard that. So, and I've done
I don't know that it's 100% true. There's no way I can know.
Here's what I'll say. Actually, I'm going to take a quick minute or two to jump on a very important soapbox, if you will. If you are listening right now and you have cancer, you know somebody with cancer, you ever get cancer, I'm going to tell you why I believe that I beat it when the odds were not in my favor, right? 20% to 30% chance of survival for people with my cancer. Now, by the way, I didn't want to do chemo at all, right? It's literally a poison. It poisons the cancer cells and it poisons your body. Many people die from the chemo, not the cancer, right? So I was like, I don't want to play that game. I want to strengthen my body, right? If I have cancer, how can I do this naturally? And I went to my doctor. I said, hey, doc, the first day I met him, when he told me the cancer that I had, he was my second opinion. I'd already gotten diagnosed, but I'm like, all right, go to MD Anderson Cancer Hospital. They're supposed to be the best in the country. Sat down with one of the best leukemia oncologists. And he's like, he's telling me what I have and how bad the rate is of survival and that I just got to do the chemo. And I said, doc, I appreciate that. I don't want to do chemo. I want to cure this holistically. Can you support me in that? And he said, Hal, I appreciate that you want to do that, but you don't have that kind of cancer. It's not a slow growing tumor where you have any time to play. You literally have a week to live, maybe two, if you don't start chemo. And my wife is squeezing my hand under the table, about to break it. And I'm pissed. Like, I'm just like, how dare you say that? And the thing is, I'm like, he's trying to scare me into chemo. That was kind of my internal narrative. And I said, all right, doc, well, give me 24 hours to do a little research and then we'll go from there. And so he goes, okay, but I wouldn't wait more than 24 hours to start the chemo. And by the way, it's not just any chemo. Because the cancer is so rare and aggressive and fast acting, it is the most intensive chemotherapy regimen I believe that there is. They hit you so hard. So yeah, it ended up being 650 hours of chemotherapy over 8 months. So that's what I'm dealing with. Oh, and here's what he's saying, right? So I'm going, okay, so you're telling me that if I listen to you, I have a 20 to 30% chance of not dying. That's your success rate. That'd be like a financial advisor. It's like, give me all of your money, put all your eggs in one basket. And there is only a 70 to 80% chance that I'm going to lose everything you've worked so hard for your entire life. Will you trust me? Right? You're like, are you kidding me? So I went home and I called some of the best I found out like the best holistic doctors in the country. And they both told me that two of them, they both told me, do chemo. Your cancer is so rare and aggressive. The doctor is not exaggerating. You have a week or two to live. At that time, my heart was failing. My kidneys were failing. My lung was failing. And so anyway, so I was like, well, if the best holistic doctors in the country are saying chemo's your best bet, dude, we got nothing for you. And so I started the chemo. But here's the point. I did everything holistically as if I weren't doing chemo. So that's my advice. I just want to mention that and I asked the doctor, hey, doc, what do you think about this? I have no idea. They didn't teach me that in med school, right? Big pharma sponsored med school didn't tell me about all those natural things because they're not profitable for me, right? So I know cancer is so prevalent. Almost everybody's affected by it in some way. If you're going to do chemo, great, or whatever, do chemo, but do everything in your power. There's a book called Radical Remission. Great website, chrisbeatcancer.com. chrisbeatcancer.com. He beat his cancer naturally, then went on a quest to interview the best natural holistic oncologists in the world and bring the best of that information to you. So it's like a great one-stop shop, chrisbeatcancer.com for everything. So anyway, it's just so important to mention if somebody's dealing with that, just to know kind of what I did and how to approach it.
So that philosophy comes from miracle equation. Like that's part of your whole miracle equation. And the way that I look at miracle equation, because I haven't tried it in all of the ways that you've tried it or seen it in all the ways that are written about in your book. Yeah. But I will say that this is how I get results of different things. The way that I get results is other people, for example, I'm going to just go to my meetup group that I used to have that became one of the top meetups in the world. Yeah. That meetup group that I founded and started and grew, other people that did meetups, they would basically advertise or sponsor. This is actually what they would do. They would post it on meetup.com. That was it. They would just put the thing there. And then other people that did a little bit more would email it to the email list. And then other people that did a little bit more would email it to the meetup list and also their own personal list. And it just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And the way that I got people to come to my events was how I marketed like crazy. It also reminds me of 10X rule, which I haven't always been a fan of Grant Cardone. I think it's a little arrogant, and that's okay. A little bit. I haven't been a big fan, but I love 10X rule because it reminds me of just doing all of the things, going all out, putting all of your, like, knowing that this is going to happen. And this is reminding me of what you just said about trying everything, including the holistically. Like you did the cancer chemo for the cancer, but also you hired this person, you worked with this person, you tried this thing, you learned anything that you could get your hands on, probiotics, whatever, who knows what you were taking, plant medicines, etc., is something that seems like other people would be like, okay, I just put it in this person's hands. But you are like, I'm going to do everything I can. And you beat it. You were 1 out of 5, 1 out of 3 people that could ever beat that. And I think that it comes because like the whole lesson that you get from Miracle Equation, the book, like a big lesson is go all out, blitz this shit, right? Just like, do not quit. Do not let it be up to chance. Do everything you can possibly do. And when you have that unwavering faith and action, I think that's a big part of it is the action behind the faith. Then you're probably going to accomplish anything. What do you have to say to that?
Well, yeah. I mean, what's interesting is the miracle equation. So that was a strategy I created when I was 20 years old, and I was trying to break a Cutco sales record, right? So I was one of Cutco. I worked for Cutco Cutlery for many years, and I was trying to become the first rep in 50 years to hit this certain sales goal. And no one had ever done it. And the odds were stacked against me for a variety of reasons. And I reverse engineered it at the start. I went, okay, this feels impossible. If I were to do this, what would have to have happened? Right? Kind of fast forward and reverse engineer. And I go, okay, well, there's really 2 components here. There's mindset, right? There's how I approach this mentally and emotionally, what I tell myself, what I think. And then there's the outward, there's the action, right? So there's the mindset and then there's the effort or the action. And so I realized I need to maintain unwavering faith that I can reach this, right? I thought, okay, what if halfway through the sales period, what if I'm not on track? Well, when we're not on track for a goal, it's very natural to go, guess I'm not going to hit it. I go, well, that would make it impossible for me to hit it if that was my mindset. So I have to maintain unwavering faith until the last possible moment. That's the only way. Like if I'm going into the last day and I'm still 50% away from the goal, right? I got one day left. Well, if I tell myself there's no way I could do this, then there's no way I could do this. The only way, and I literally I called it a miracle. I'm like, it's like, if this happens, it'll be a miracle. It's never been done before. And so I was like, the only way that miracle is going to happen is if I maintain unwavering faith until the last possible moment. And then I go, okay, and the second piece is the effort. I've got to put forth extraordinary effort, which doesn't mean I have to work 80 hours a week. It means that I need to every day, I need to do everything in my power to reach this goal, even when I don't feel like it. And so I went out and it was a 2-week sales period, right? I was trying to break the record for the most ever sold in 2 weeks. And after the first week, I was like 70% away from where I needed to be. Like I was way off. I'm like, okay, my natural human thought was, dude, I'm not going to do it. But I was like, no. I committed ahead of time that I would consciously maintain unwavering faith by telling myself I was going to reach the goal no matter what. There was no other option. So I repeated over and over and over. What's interesting is when this becomes I call this the faith effort feedback loop, meaning when you establish unwavering faith and then you maintain it proactively every day through your thoughts and your words and even your actions, it fuels the effort. Because if you're telling yourself, I'm committed to do no matter what, then now you have the drive to do it. Because if you're like, there's no way I'm going to make it happen, well, then you're not going to put forth the effort. And then when you put forth the effort, it fuels the faith because you're like, I'm doing it. I'm doing everything in my power. I deserve this. I'm telling you, I mentioned that when I had cancer, I was doing coffee enemas. Right. If you don't know what that is, right, it's where you put 32 ounces of coffee up your butt. Right. Like, and then you hold it for 15 minutes and then you let right. If that sounds uncomfortable to you, yes. Right. So but when I would do it, I'd be like, I deserve to beat this freaking cancer, man. Like, this is not comfortable. This is my extraordinary effort, but I deserve it. So the faith fuels the effort and the effort fuels the faith, which fuels the effort, it's this round and round we go. And so back to the original story, on the last day, I was still like 30% away I was way off, right? The odds of me reaching the goal were, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I don't know how. And of course, was there a part of me that was like, no, who are you kidding, Hal? Like, yeah, this is cute. Your little unwavering faith and extraordinary effort. That's cute, right? But you're not being realistic. But dude, on the very last sales appointment, I had my biggest order, overshadowed all the other orders. And I reached the goal and drove straight to the conference and took number 1 and broke this all-time, right? So what's interesting is the miracle equation started with that. And then I started teaching it to other people and in my organization, and it worked. And they broke record after record after record. Then I started applying it to other areas of my life. Then I started studying the world's most successful people and be like, oh, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that accomplished something extraordinary and didn't do it by maintaining unwavering faith and putting forth extraordinary effort. Look at an NBA or any athlete. I think like Michael Jordan, right? Game is on the line. They're way behind. He's been missing shots all game. It looks like you might as well go home. And somehow in the fourth quarter, Michael Jordan maintains unwavering faith that he can figure out how to come back from behind and win the game. And he put forth extraordinary effort until the last possible moment. And he makes that shot at the buzzer and breaks the record for the most points ever scored in the fourth quarter, right? Like, that's how successful people do the impossible, AKA create these miracles. And so, yeah, whether it's applying it to your business or athletics or your marriage or writing a book or beating cancer, right? Those two decisions that make up the miracle equation, I think it's universal across the board for anyone that does these things or wants to do these things.
I have to ask, in your opinion, if you don't mind sharing, this being 30% down with just your last day left,
yeah,
it seems impossible. You maintain unwavering faith and action.
Yeah.
Is there something in your opinion that is divine about this? Or is it like, is it you? Like, is it Hal? Is it Adam? Is it Sarah? Is it Emily? Or is it like divinity?
I believe both. right? And it's real hard to put it into words, right? Or, like there's no precision in the answer to your question, right? But no, there's something where I feel like the universe rewards those that live this way because it's so few people, right? I mean, I'd be willing to say 99% of people don't maintain unwavering faith. They can do the seemingly impossible. They do whatever they know they can do. Right. One of the human values or needs is certainty, right? It's like, I'm going to approach a goal I believe I can reach. And if I'm not on track and it doesn't look like I can reach it, then I'm going to give up or just abandon the goal, do something else. Right. So I do believe there's something divine and I don't know how to, I believe in God, but I don't know how to explain it exactly. But when I talk about unwavering faith, people naturally tend to think like attribute that to religion or God. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about unwavering faith in your ability to do things beyond what you've ever done before. Like it's really a faith in yourself, but I shouldn't say that. That's one perspective. If you want to put all the faith in God that's going to enable you to do this, that right? Like to me, the unwavering faith, it's kind of what you can white label it. I've never put it that way, right? But you can white label it. You can apply it to God or to the universe or to your own ability or to luck, whatever, right? But what happened is I started teaching it to other people. And at the time, it was like within the Cutco company, because that's where I was still working, right? I remember it was this girl, Jerry Azinger, and she's like, Hal, the most I've ever sold in a 2-week push, it was called a push period, is $10,000. And I'm wondering if you can coach me on selling $15,000. She goes, which is like, so that's 50% more than I've ever done. And when I sold 10,000, I did everything in my power. And she said, but I'm wondering if you can coach me to 15. And I said, Jerry, yes and no. No, I will not coach you to sell $15,000, but yes, I will coach you to sell $20,000 because I believe that if I can do it, you can do it too. And she was like, oh boy, like I'm terrified to go for 15, Hal, but if you think I could do 20, like, okay. And so the first week she sold like $7,000, right? So she was on track for 14,000. So she wasn't horribly behind, but she did everything in her power to sell 7, and now she had to sell 13, right? So pretty big difference, almost double. So she's way behind. And she's like, Hal, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to maintain unwavering faith, and I'm going to give it extraordinary of everything I have. And then she goes into the last day, and she's like, Hal, I think she was like $5,000 away. She's like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I put forth extraordinary effort. I have 6 presentations tomorrow. She's like, so that's all I could fit in the day. Like, there's nothing more I can do. And I'm taking your advice. I'm telling myself it's going to happen. I don't know how. And the next day she somehow she surpassed her goal. And she was like, Hal, it's a freaking miracle. She's like, you're like the way it happened. Like, because that's what's the crazy part. When I did it, it was like the wrong lady showed to my appointment. It was her sister-in-law on vacation from Europe. No, who's going to buy a $3,000 set of knives when they're on vacation from Europe? But she ended up that's where the divinity, I'm like, there's no way this happened. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So yes, I think part of the faith is like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but if I maintain unwavering faith and put forth extraordinary effort, it can happen. And here's the thing. It might not happen the first time, right? Maybe you have to try 5 times and you have to try that approach. Every time you maintain unwavering faith and put forth extraordinary effort. In fact, let me share one more quick story. The year that I published The Miracle Morning, right? And that's the book that launched my whole career. The Miracle Morning, my goal, I had already been giving talks on it, doing interviews. And so I had people that were emailing me, this Miracle Morning changed my life. It saved my marriage. It got me off my depression medication, like these really profound outcomes. That's why I wrote the book. I'm like, I have to write a book about this. Like the people I share it with, it is life-changing for them. And so I self-published the book. And I started thinking big, right? I'm like, miracle equation. I go, all right, I want to change 1 million lives one morning at a time. That became the mission that I wrote down in my daily affirmations. Change 1 million lives one morning at a time. Now, what are the time frames we usually set when we set goals?
A year?
It's usually a year, right? So I'm like, all right, I got 1 year. I published this December 12. December 12th, 2012 was the publish date. I'm like, all right, I got 2013. I got 1 year to sell 1 million copies. And I'm going to apply the miracle equation because it's worked before. I maintained unwavering faith, and the extraordinary effort was this. Dude, I did 152 podcast interviews on other people's podcasts. I launched my own podcast that year, as I told you, to nurture my readers that were subscribing to my email list, right? I hired a publicist. I got on 13 morning talk shows, national and local, like Good Morning Sacramento, national show called Daytime NBC, right? I gave 36 speeches across the country. I nurtured my Miracle Morning Community Facebook group. I promoted on social media. Dude, Adam, I did everything. And by the way, this story might be the most impactful for a lot of people listening, because when you hear how this ended up, everything in my power, extraordinary effort. I lived, right, the miracle equation. At the end of the year, when I gave everything in my power and maintained unwavering faith that I would change 1 million lives one morning at a time, I sold 13,000 books that year. Now, if you do a little math, I was 987,000 copies short of my goal. That means I was 98.7% short of my goal, right? Now, how did I feel about that? I felt like shit. Like I was like, oh, this sucks. I did the math. I think I was like, okay, at this rate, it'll take me 117 years to sell 1 million copies. I'm like, oh, right. Like I was discouraged, right? But that's part of the miracle equation. That's why the faith is unwavering. And by the way, I forgot to mention an important part of the equation: unwavering faith and extraordinary effort until you reach the outcome. And it usually takes longer than you think. So I brushed my shoulders off, right? Dusted myself off. And I was like, all right, it didn't happen year one, but my commitment was to change 1 million lives one morning at a time. I guess it's going to take a little longer. I'm going to try again. And I did everything in my power again: podcast interviews, TV interviews, every speeches. And I sold 23,000 copies year two, right? Great increase, but I'm still nowhere near where I want to be. So I tried year three. I didn't hit the goal. I tried year four. I didn't hit the goal. I tried year five. I didn't hit the goal. But I was hitting that critical mass. My sales were exponentially increasing. And it took 6 years to change 1 million lives one morning at a time, at least in a measurable way of selling 1 million books. And here is one of the most important lessons I've ever learned that I hold with me today in everything that I do, is that number one, what you want to accomplish in your life will almost always take longer than you want it to, right? Longer than you think it should, longer than you hoped for, longer than you planned for. Now, if you give up along the way, then you have failed, right? You've heard that said, probably the only failure is in giving up. If you keep trying, you haven't failed, you just haven't gotten there yet, right? And so I wanted to do it in a year, but it took me 6. And here's the lesson. The greatest lesson is this: when you finally get to the point in your life or in your business or with your podcast that you have been working for so long, working so hard, maintaining unwavering faith, putting forth extraordinary effort, when you finally get there, you almost never wish it would have happened any sooner. Instead, you look back and you go, oh, it was supposed to take 6 years. I had to go through exactly what I went through when I went through it. And then you might do what I did, which is like, man, I wasted so much energy being stressed and feeling insecure and feeling like I was failing and comparing myself to other authors that were selling more copies or other podcasters, right? Like, what a waste. I should have just enjoyed every moment. And that, by the way, is the greatest lesson in life to me. Enjoy every moment. Enjoy every moment. You've been blessed with one life. It's eventually going to end. And if you spend a lot of your moments stressed, worried, fearful, scared, angry, depressed, whatever, at the end of your life, I believe we're going to look back and go, man, why wasn't I just happy the entire time? Those challenges were going to happen anyway. I was going to get cancer anyway. I was going to go through painful experiences anyway. But why did I allow them to ruin those moments and those days and those weeks and those months of this one life that I was blessed to live? I can't get that time back. So for me now, it's life's going to be ups and downs and whatever. I'm going to enjoy every moment that I possibly can, even when they're stressful, even when they're painful, even when they're scary. I'm going to enjoy them.
So much there. I want to just go and cover some of the things that we talked about, which are just impactful for me. And one thing is, this took you 6 years, and I was trying to do the timeline on it, and it seems like 2 of those years you had this aggressive form of cancer. it seems like the last 2 years out of the 6, like you had real uphill battle.
Yeah,
and
really one. It was October 2016, so about a year.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I think just for anybody listening, regardless of what you're looking to achieve, whether it's in your relationship, your business, and podcasting or whatever, these lessons are just so impactful. Like one question that I have, well, let me say this first. If you quit, you fail. Yeah. It's like 3 feet from gold, that big thing. Like he didn't have to leave that land and that ore to somebody else, but he pushed and pushed and pushed, but not the last part that you said, not until it happened.
Yeah.
He pushed until he gave up. And that's why the next person was able to come and get right to the gold with just very minimal drilling. Just very, very interesting. But I got a question. Like, here you are, you have a wife, you have kids, you got financial needs, your book wasn't taking off. You had, I think it was 16,000 copies, then 23,000 more copies. And like, you're putting out extraordinary amount of efforts. When I'm hearing you, like, I know how many times I've spoke on other people's stages, and it's nowhere near, I think you said like 36 in a year or something. Yeah. Like it's never been that, but that's a shit ton of traveling. And then like your amounts of podcast episodes where you're on other people's podcasts, where you're basically recording. That's at least 3 a year. And you're spending money as well with publicists to get you on different TV spots. Yeah. Like, how do you keep putting money in? Like, that's the big thing is like, I don't know if you were a millionaire before all this happened. So like, what's making you say, all right, we're just going to keep advertising? Like your wife's not telling you just quit while you're behind. Yeah.
So one is I was doing it as cheap as I could, right? I've always been kind of guerrilla. I didn't have a team. I wasn't paying anybody. I mean, eventually I had I think 2014, I hired an assistant who's still with me today. But so I was keeping the expenses minimal. I paid to get on the TV shows. It was like 10 grand or something, right? Like, so there was a couple big expenses that went on but I didn't advertise. It was almost all guerrilla marketing, right? It was all me getting on interviews, right? That's what I love about podcasting. It's free, and I had to pay a producer $1,000 a month to do my podcast, but getting on other podcasts, right? So it was a lot of as minimal cost as possible. I think that the real question that's in your question is, how do you keep going when you're not getting where you want as fast as you want, right? And how do you decipher between, wait, should I do something else? And this is the answer to me. It's you pay attention to the feedback. You pay attention to the impact that you're making, right? I saw the Miracle Morning was making, yes, it wasn't selling as many copies as I wanted, but reading the reviews on Amazon of, like I said, people, this saved my marriage. This changed my life in these profound ways. This book is, right? Like, and so I was like, okay, I just have to keep letting people know about it, right? Like if you put out a podcast and people are like, it's okay. If you're getting feedback like, hey, this is a decent podcast, it's okay. Like sometimes I listen, I don't really care, right? But if your podcast is like, if you know, right? And obviously knowing within yourself versus knowing because people are telling you is a different thing, right? You can think you know something and believe it's going to, I've put things out there before, whether it's a book or I've done programs before coaching where I'm like, I think this is it. And I'm like, oh, no one's buying it. And the people that buy it are dropping off after a month. Oh, okay. Let me do something else, right? So if that was the case, I would have shifted gears. But no, it was like, okay, this is the right thing. I just need to keep putting energy into it. And I had read a book, by the way, called The Tipping Point, which had kind of said that like big brands and products and stuff that take off, it's often not in the beginning. It's often like it takes, if you have something that's a proven entity or whatever, that's something that's proven, it's getting results for people. You just got to keep getting it out there until enough people know about it.
Awesome, Hal. You have been amazing. I know that it is time to wrap up this episode, but I just want to say to you, like from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for the value that you dropped today. Like it might not have all been about just podcasting, but most of it relies on any of us if we are podcasters. And that is something that I absolutely appreciate. If you're listening to this episode, you got a lot of value out of it. It would be amazeballs if you jumped over and gave us a rating and review and just told us what you think. I will read those. I will pay attention to them. I will see what you're saying. Give us a 1-star review, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. It doesn't matter. Whatever's honest, whatever comes from your heart, especially after listening to this amazing interview with Hal. Just like this has been incredible value, at least for me. And it remotivates me to really put myself out there, especially with all the stuff that Hal has gone through and getting cancer in 2016. getting like PTSD in 2019 in December. And like, he's talking about how nobody would have known, like nobody, because he's in the limelight. He's in front of you. He's in front of everybody, right? And everybody thinks this guy's got all of his shit together. He's the man. And he's going through something because of the chemo and chemo brain. And he's not taking no for an answer. And he's like, nobody would have known, but he kept producing the podcast because he knew that he was adding value to other people. Yes, he was probably making a little bit of money through the sponsorship also, but like he's going through some real trouble. And his main motivation was, as he was saying, like, how can I take my own life? It would minimally impact my children. How can I do that? His response coming from Zig Ziglar was, it's not about me. You want to help enough other people get what they want. It's not about him. It's a giving. It's a, what was the word that Hal said today? It's a service that you're providing that really, like, in a way, Hal believes in God or the universe. And he knows that this is kind of like his thing that he needs to be doing. And if you're a podcaster, you probably understand that you've got something that has to come out of your heart and into the mind of your listener, of your perfect avatar, the person that you want to help. So we talked about so many things. I would recommend, I'm going to put an affiliate link to Miracle Morning. I'm going to put an affiliate link to Miracle Equation, because these are books that have impacted the lives of many, many people. If you're listening, you should know that the next episode is going to be a solo episode where it's me pouring into you. And I'm looking forward to that. So I will see you on the next episode. Bye for now. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.